Hey everybody, this is Paul, also known as 6 Mile. I'm the founder of Source Code Red. We are a software supply chain offensive security services startup. We also do training, which is called Red Teaming the Software Supply Chain, which I've done this year in the US, Australia, Canada, and Singapore. I wanted to drop a quick video because I'm disclosing a brand new type of attack at Melbourne BSides 2024. And this video is the companion to that public disclosure of the attack. So let's go ahead and kick on. What is swatting? Well, swatting is a terrible, terrible practice. It's when somebody makes a false report to an emergency services to trigger an armed police response on an unsuspecting victim. Now, typically this, the bad guy calling it in will say, hey, there's an armed person inside the house. They're threatening people or whatever it is, whatever the story is. The bad guy's intent is to have armed police officers dispatched to the target address. And unfortunately, often innocent people are hurt as a result of this hoax. Now, swatting originally became popular on 4chan. It's now popular on online gaming kind of platforms. Unfortunately, real swatting, physical swatting is growing in the U.S. and it has led to fatalities. There are even reports of swatting as a service groups. Calling 911 in the U.S. or 000 here in Australia, it's a fundamental safety mechanism that allows people to call the police in a time of trouble and ask for help. And this practice of swatting is taking a system that was designed to do something good and it twists it to do evil. And this is the really important thing that I want you to take away from today's video. So you might ask, why am I talking about swatting? Well, I've spent a lot of time over the last year researching trust and safety precautions in the SCM providers like GitHub and GitLab. I've identified a new attack type, which I call Repo Swatting. Because like physical swatting, it takes a safety precaution meant to do something good and it twists it to do something bad. This is the first time I'm going to be talking about this publicly, aside from obviously my disclosure at Melbourne BSides. One note, I do want to I'm going to say GitHub, but I mean GitHub, GitLab, and Gitea, which are the three platforms that I've identified this attack exists in. When I say GitHub, I'm just doing that to shorten it because I don't want to keep saying all three of those platforms. Do be aware that this attack affects all those platforms a little bit differently, but it does affect all three of them. Before I show you how easy this attack is, let's take a really quick look at a few of the core features in the SCM providers that makes this repo swatting attack possible. I want to set the foundation of what those core kind of things are. So a real quick kind of explanation of source code management providers like GitHub and GitLab. The company stores its source code in the SCM provider. Some of the developers might have their own personal accounts as well. Now, to the mainstream and non-developers, I think the business value for GitHub and its kind of competitors is seen as storing source code. But that's not really the real business value here. The business value is really in the collaboration of the software engineers and the people that work with them to deliver applications. So, for example, multiple developers can be all working on the same project. They can be checking in individual kind of feature branches in their own code. The SCM platform brings that together, integrates it into one unified code base, and that's part of continuous integration. And then as part of continuous deployment or delivery, it can then go take that unified code base and do something with it, deploy it somewhere, make an actual application that all of us can use and get value out of. All of this involves a crap ton of collaboration, lots and lots of collaboration. Now, there are multiple ways to collaborate on the SCM platforms like GitHub. You can edit a repo directly in the web UI if the owner gives you explicit permission. Not super common, but totally doable. A more common way is that you can fork somebody's public repository, and you can make your own copy of that. You can then make changes to your fork, and you can then commit those changes back into the original via something called a pull request or a merge request. If the original owner of the source code repository thinks that your changes are good, they can then merge your changes into their project, and suddenly your code is part of the main project. Bob's your uncle. That's how this collaboration works. There's another important collaboration feature I want to talk about today, which are called issues and then comments on things like Git commits. These are two additional ways to interact with somebody else's repository. But unlike the other earlier examples, the commits, commit comments, and issues don't require explicit permission for you to do that. That's an important distinction I want to call out here. So, for example, here's a GitHub repository. If you see that second tab there, it says issues. This is one of the first two ways that you can collaborate without explicit permission. You click on issues, that'll take you to a new view where you click on new issue. That'll open up this tab. You can add comments in here. You can say, hey, hey 6 Mile, I saw that you're using this function. It doesn't really work. It's doing this on my machine, whatever the case may be, right? You can make your own comments. You can also add files here. You can drop files directly into this form, and those files can be any type of file you want to, executables, images, binaries, JSON, whatever it is you want to drop in there, you can do it. Any file type is allowed. Now, the second way to do this that I mentioned is you can go on when you're on the main view of a repository, you can go and find the commit. In this case, you can see there it says two commits. Every repo will have this. You click on that, it'll take you to the commit history, which is just a list. This particular repo has 2 in this branch. And if you click on any of the commit IDs, which you can see here with the red arrow, that'll take you into this form. What you're seeing here is this allows a developer to look at how the source code was before, which is the what's in red, the kind of previous state, and then the changes that were made to that in green. Now, the important thing here isn't that. It's that you can click in either of those two windows there, and a little plus symbol, which you can see there on the far right side, will appear. And if you click on that, guess what? It pops open this little form here. And then this form allows you to do exactly what you could do over in GitHub Issues. You can write a comment, whatever you want to. You can also drop files in here just like you can before. Any type of file, you can drop it right in here. Now, this ability to attach a file is a core function of the SCM providers. All of them have it, and it's a super core kind of fundamental component. This core function can also be abused, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, GitHub has its own CDN, which is called the GitHub User Content, Objects User Content CDN. The other SCM providers have their own version of this. This CDN is an important part of this repo swatting attack. Now, you can see here on the screen, back in April when this kind of blew up and got a lot of notoriety, you could drop files into the form field, and then you could see at the top there what this looked like. In this case, somebody's being cheeky, and they're dropping some files into some Microsoft repositories, the VC package and STL repositories, respectively, and then that added that URL. Now, those files are immediately available. Once you drop that in there, it uploads the file. Those files are then immediately available on that URL, and that's how the CDN works. And interestingly enough, you don't actually have to finish this comment. Once you drop the file in there and it uploads to the CDN, you can back out of this issue or comment, never finish it, so you won't see it in the list of comments or issues. But guess what? The file has been uploaded. Again, this is a core component of this attack process. Initially, this was kind of a joke. So some people, for example, somebody uploaded Mimikatz to a Microsoft MSRC repo. It was kind of funny. People kind of having a laugh. None of it was diabolical. This guy Parth said that he had been using the GitHub CDN to host his blog contents for years. It allowed him to do that for free. I do know that this file upload process has been around for years and years and years. I found mentions of it as far back as 2012 when people were saying, hey, this is people are hosting malicious files. So all the way back over 10 years ago, people were identifying that this was a way for you to host malicious files. So people started taking notice of this. Articles started hitting the kind of IT press. And this anonymous kind of CD hosting feature was really cool for red teams, right? It allowed you to host anonymously a malicious file in the GitHub domain context. This is within, obviously an offensive security operation or red team engagement for a company. So it was really good, and I used it that way myself. When companies were paying me to do this. However, bad guys also saw this, and they started flooding GitHub with malicious content. And it was all kinds of crap. It was CSAM and revenge porn and crypto miners and all kinds of other stuff. But actually, it was mostly crypto miners. Not to say it wasn't that other stuff, but it's just like thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of crypto miners. I have personally seen them myself. So you understand now how this file upload process can be abused to host any file you want to. Now let's kind of continue talking about where we're going here for repo swatting, right? So as I was thinking about this file upload feature, this anonymous file upload feature, in the context of red teaming, because that's what I am, right? I'm a good guy. People pay me to help identify these issues, and then I help them fix them, and then they're better off afterwards. But within the context of red teaming, I thought, what if I could take this file upload process and I could plug it into something else? I could say, hey, let me combo this with maybe an abuse report, for example. What would happen? Would the repo get flagged, or would it get removed? I wanted to test this. So what I did is I created a number of what I call code puppets. Code puppets are fake GitHub personas that basically allow you to do security research in these platforms, not as you. I teach people how to create code puppets in my my training class. But anyhow, this is one of those, Puppet Tom G. And I think this screenshot is from June, roughly speaking. I talk about it in my course. All right. So anyhow, what I did is I dropped 3 crypto miners into that code puppet. From another account, both of these accounts, by the way, are owned by me. No innocent bystanders were hurt in the process of this. I owned all accounts involved. I've never done this to anybody else except my own accounts, both the source and target. But in this case, one of my code puppets dropped crypto miners into another code puppet, and you can see here those links as they were uploaded. Once those uploads were done, I could cancel this issue. I could back out of it, and those files were still immediately available in the GitHub CDN. And you can see here where I'm actually I'm using wget to pull one of those files down immediately. It totally works. Those files are all available. What I then did is I went to the repository and I clicked on the report repository link. But actually, later on I found a better way to do this was not to do it at the repository level, but actually to go to the account level and actually click on report abuse on the account. And then basically you make a abuse report like this. You basically say, hey, blah, blah, blah. Here's the files being hosted. And then you click submit and you wait. And eventually, after a couple hours or maybe a couple days, you get this email. And this is basically just a default email you get saying, hey, we want to let you know that we've received your message. We're taking a look at it. We'll get back to you. And then the first time I did this, I just waited. I waited for a long time. And I eventually got this email. Our review of the accounts and or content named in the report has concluded. We have determined that one or more violations of the GitHub term of service have occurred, and we've taken appropriate action. And I was like, well, what kind of action did they take? Like, what'd they do? So I went and checked my Puppet Tom G account, and boom, it was deleted. I was like, oh, shit. I just nuked a whole GitHub account. So then I went and tried it in GitLab, and guess what? Same thing. Although it's a little bit different. They show in GitLab that it blocks the user, but effectively the user is deleted. You can't log into it anymore. And I was just totally taken aback. The problem though is that this attack isn't well suited for good guys like me, red teamers. Like, it's just far too destructive. I can't use this in the context of a red teaming engagement. It's just too destructive. However, it's pretty handy for bad guys, and I have seen bad guys using this in the wild, unfortunately. That really sucks. Let's real quick talk through the timeline and how GitHub in particular has mitigated some of this, because TLDR, most of this attack has been mitigated, but you can still do it in some let me walk you through this. So basically, in April of 2024, that's when news of this kind of hit the mainstream media, right? And they picked up on the fact that GitHub was being used to host malware and other bad things. Then, in August of 2024, GitHub makes its first change to try to mitigate this issue. They changed the path of the URL that the uploaded items were saved to. So it was still github.com/ the target user and the target repo /assets. That had never changed. What did change was that the file name no longer was like mimikatz.exe. As soon as you uploaded mimikatz.exe, it changed the name to a randomly generated UID. Now, it's not really a great mitigation, but at least I guess it takes away the name of the file, I suppose. So then in September of 2024, GitHub required that all file uploads now have an extension. So basically what that means is that if you went to go drop a file into that form field that I showed you and it didn't have an extension, it would prompt you say, hey, you only can upload PNGs, .exes, so on and so forth. But it still allowed you to upload all those files. As long as they had an extension, you were good to go. So not much mitigation at all. Then in October of 2024, that's when they actually made a significant change. What they did is they now changed the path a second time. It was no longer the target user in the target repo. Now it was github.com/user attachments/assets, and then that randomly generated UID. Now, at the same time they did this, they must have made some change in the back end too as well, because basically what this change did in October was to effectively kill the tight coupling between the repository you were dropping the file into and the file itself. After this change, the connection between that target and the file, it was then broken, which is good because as soon as they changed this, effectively I couldn't repo swat with the new pathing. So if I dropped a new file in there and it was given the user attachments path, I could not repo swat based on that. Then also in October 2024, GitHub required that you finally had to be authenticated as a GitHub user to upload files to GitHub. Now, one thing I want to point out here is that GitLab never allowed you to do this unauthenticated. Like if you wanted to create an issue or a comment in GitLab, you had to be logged in as a user. GitHub didn't. You could just roll up, never log in, and drop files into somebody else's repo, and you were good to go. However, they changed that in October. You now had to be logged in to do that. So, hopefully no more anonymous uploads, right? Well, actually, about the same time, GitHub weakened their new account onboarding. So you can effectively make those code puppets I was talking about earlier in less than a minute with like a Proton account. So really, and you don't need a phone number, you don't need a credit card number, you can just make an account as long as you got a working email, and Proton does work. I've verified it many times. So that effectively gives you anonymous uploads again. So thanks, GitHub. Anyhow, I hope that you really enjoyed this talk here. This is Repo Swatting. Like I said, the TLDR is that now using the new path, effectively you cannot repo swat using that new pathing because the tight coupling between the repo that you're adding the file to and the file itself has now been broken. However, any files that were uploaded before the path changes still are sitting out there with their old pathing, and they can still be successfully used for repo swatting. I have verified this. I've actually done this relatively recently where I had an account that I had added some files to earlier in the year, and I went and tested it, and sure enough, I nuked the whole account. And this was after all the mitigations I talked about. In fact, this was the fastest successful repo swat that I've ever done. It took just over 90 minutes all up to delete that account. If you have an account that's got some files uploaded in it and those are malicious files, you could potentially, in theory, use that to still repo swat, but you would have to know what those files were, what their context was, unless you came up with some way to find those files yourself. Anyhow, thanks so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. If you want to reach out to me, my deets are here on the screen. Have a good one. Hope you've enjoyed. Bye-bye.